What happens when absolute power meets absolute refusal? When desire collides with defiance? One creature, a humble dolphin, would change everything, becoming the unlikely hero in the greatest love story the ancient seas have ever known. If you're hooked, support this channel. Smash that like button, hit subscribe, and drop a comment. Have you ever wanted something so badly it consumed you? Let's dive into the depths where gods fall in love, and the ocean holds its breath. Deep in the abyss where sunlight dies and pressure crushes stone into dust, there stood a palace unlike anything mortals could imagine. Walls of living coral pulsed with bioluminescent light. Columns of crystallized sea foam reached toward the surface miles above. Gardens of swaying kelp hummed with ancient magic, and through every hall echoed the thunder of a god's footsteps. This was the domain of Poseidon, brother of Zeus, shaker of the earth, lord of every wave that kissed every shore. His trident could split continents. His rage could birth hurricanes that swallowed entire fleets. Creatures of nightmare, the kraken, the leviathan, serpents with scales like iron, bowed before him. He was power incarnate, draped in robes that shimmered like oil on water, his beard flowing like sea foam, his eyes holding the cold, infinite blue of the deepest trenches. Yet for all his dominion, for all the trembling obedience of his subjects, Poseidon knew a hunger that oceans could not satisfy: loneliness. His palace was magnificent and empty. His throne was carved from a single pearl the size of a temple, and he sat upon it alone. Gods and mortals alike feared him. None dared to love him, until the day the sea itself seemed to hold its breath. Far above, where light still danced through the waves, a chorus of laughter rippled across the water. The Nereids, 50 daughters of the ancient sea god Nereus, were dancing. These weren't ordinary nymphs. Each was born from sea foam and starlight, blessed with voices that made whales weep and beauty that put the moon to shame. They moved through the water like living poetry, trailing ribbons of silver light, their songs weaving through the currents. And among them, one shone brighter than all the rest: Amphitrite. Her hair was the color of midnight water kissed by phosphorescence. Her eyes held depths that even Poseidon's trenches could not match. Mysterious, intelligent, wild. When she laughed, pearls formed in oysters. When she sang, dolphins gathered from across the 7 seas to listen. She moved with a grace that made the water itself jealous, and she belonged to no one. Poseidon saw her, and the ocean floor trembled with something new: desire, absolute, consuming, undeniable. He rose from his throne like a storm-gathering strength. The water around him darkened, charged with divine energy. His courtiers, sea spirits, minor deities, creatures that had served him for eons, scattered like frightened fish. They had seen their lord angry before, seen him unleash devastation with a gesture. But this was different. This was hunger, wearing the face of a god. Poseidon ascended through the water columns of his palace, through the kelp forests, through the hunting grounds of sharks and the territories of giant squids that dared not approach. He moved with purpose, and the ocean parted before him like a living curtain. Schools of fish fled, whales dove deep. Even the currents themselves seemed to bow. When he emerged into the sun-dappled shallows where the Nereids danced, the water around him shimmered with power. He was magnificent, terrifying and beautiful in equal measure. His presence was a command, an expectation of submission. After all, he was Poseidon. The ocean was his. Everything in it belonged to him, including, he assumed, her. Amphitrite. His voice rolled through the water like distant thunder, making the very molecules vibrate. The other Nereids froze mid-dance, their faces draining of color. They knew that voice. They knew what it meant when a god spoke with such intensity. But Amphitrite? She turned slowly, almost lazily, and met his eyes without flinching. Where others saw divine authority, she saw something else. Expectation, assumption, the presumption that she would simply fall at his feet because he willed it so. Lord Poseidon. Her voice was cool as deep water, musical but distant. She inclined her head, barely, a gesture of acknowledgement, not submission. Her sisters gasped at the subtle defiance. He smiled. He had expected awe, perhaps fear sweetened with desire. Instead, he found something that intrigued him even more: independence. "I have watched you dance," he said, moving closer. The water around him warmed with his presence. "Your beauty outshines every treasure in my vaults. Your voice makes the sirens sound like croaking gulls. I would have you as my queen, rule beside me in my palace, command the seas as my consort." It wasn't a request. Gods didn't ask. They decreed, and the universe obeyed. Amphitrite studied him with those fathomless eyes. Around them, her sisters held their breath, caught between envy and terror. To be chosen by Poseidon, to become queen of all the oceans, it was beyond any dream they dared to imagine. "I am honored, great Poseidon," she said, and her tone was perfectly maddeningly polite. "But I must decline." The word hung in the water like poison. Decline. No one declined a god. Certainly no one declined Poseidon. His smile didn't fade, but something shifted in his eyes, something dangerous. "You decline?" "I belong to the open water, to the dance of currents, to my sisters and my freedom." She gestured to the Nereids around her, to the vast blue expanse above. "Your palace is magnificent, I'm sure, but it is still a palace, still walls, still depths where light cannot reach. I was born of sea foam and starlight, Lord Poseidon. I cannot live in shadow, no matter how grand the shadow may be." For a long moment, Poseidon simply stared at her. Around them, the ocean held its breath. Even the sun seemed to pause in its journey across the sky. Then, slowly, his expression changed. The polite interest melted away, replaced by something raw and primal. Not anger, not yet. Something worse. Determination. "We shall see," he said softly, dangerously, "what you can and cannot do." Amphitrite didn't wait to see what Poseidon meant by his words. She had seen that look in the eyes of gods before. The look that said choice was an illusion, that resistance was merely a delay. Her sisters scattered like startled minnows, each fleeing to their own hidden grottos and coral sanctuaries. But Amphitrite knew that nowhere in Poseidon's domain would truly be safe. The ocean was his body, his consciousness. Every wave, every current, every drop of salt water whispered to him. She needed to go where even he would hesitate to follow. She swam, not frantically, but with purpose, her powerful tail driving her through the water faster than any ship could sail. She passed through underwater canyons where ancient things slumbered, through forests of kelp so thick they blocked out what little light penetrated from above. She dove deep, then rose high, zigzagging through the three-dimensional maze of the ocean, trying to confuse her trail. But behind her, she could feel him. The water itself seemed to thicken with his presence, growing warmer, more oppressive. When she glanced back, she saw the impossible. The ocean was chasing her. Waves rose where there should be calm. currents pulled toward him like invisible hands. The sea itself had become his weapon, his net, his prison. "Amphitrite!" His voice boomed through the water everywhere and nowhere at once. "Why do you run? I offer you everything." She didn't answer. She couldn't afford to. Every moment spent in conversation was a moment he could track her voice, pinpoint her location. Instead, she pushed harder, her muscles burning with effort that would have killed a mortal, her heart hammering against her ribs. The ocean grew darker as she fled toward its edges, toward the places where Poseidon's power thinned, where older gods still held sway. She passed the realm of her father Nereus, the old man of the sea, wise and prophetic, but too cautious to challenge Poseidon. She considered seeking his help, but no, this would only endanger him. She needed someone beyond Poseidon's reach, someone whose strength was so absolute, so fundamental, that even the Lord of the Seas would think twice before trespassing. As the water grew colder and the pressure increased, as she approached the very limits of the known ocean, Amphitrite made her desperate choice. She would seek refuge with Atlas, the Titan who held the sky itself upon his shoulders, condemned to stand at the world's edge for all eternity. Surely not even Poseidon would dare disturb the bearer of the heavens. The days that followed transformed Poseidon from a god into something far more dangerous, a god with purpose, with obsession. He searched. By all the ancient laws, how he searched. First he summoned Nereus, the old sea god, father of the 50 Nereids. Nereus came reluctantly, his ancient face weathered like driftwood, his eyes holding the knowledge of countless tides. He was older than Poseidon, older than the Olympian rain, blessed with the gift of prophecy and the burden of knowing things best left unknown. "Where is she?" Poseidon's voice was deceptively calm, but his trident hummed with barely contained energy, making the water around it boil. Nereus met his gaze steadily. "My daughter has chosen her path, Lord Poseidon. I cannot, will not, betray her sanctuary." His voice was firm despite the danger. He had seen empires rise and fall, had watched gods destroy each other over lesser things than love. But Amphitrite was his blood, his daughter of the dancing waves. "Cannot or will not." The trident's glow intensified. "Both." And that was all the old god would say, even as the ocean around them began to churn with Poseidon's frustration. Nereus possessed wisdom that even a god's rage could not shake. He had nothing left to lose. His time had passed. His daughters were his only treasure, and he would guard their freedom with the last breath of his ancient soul. Poseidon let him go, barely, but the encounter taught him something crucial. Traditional methods would not work. He needed something more cunning. He turned to Proteus, the shapeshifter, the old man of the sea who could become anything, a lion, a serpent, water itself, even fire burning beneath the waves. Proteus served in Poseidon's court, but his loyalty was as fluid as his form. He was clever, adaptable, a master of evasion and secrets. "Find her," Poseidon commanded. "You can go where I cannot without raising alarm. Become a fish, a current, a ray of sunlight. I don't care. Just find her." Proteus bowed, his form already beginning to shimmer and shift. "And when I do, Lord Poseidon, what would you have me tell her?" "Nothing. Tell me. Only me." The shapeshifter's eyes gleamed with understanding and perhaps a hint of pity. He had seen this before, this particular madness that gripped gods when they confused desire with destiny. But he said nothing, merely dissolved into the water and vanished. While Proteus searched, Poseidon's obsession grew like a storm. He neglected his duties. Ships sailed unmolested or were destroyed on whims that had nothing to do with the prayers of sailors. Earthquakes rumbled at random as his trident struck the ocean floor in frustration. His court whispered in worried tones. They had never seen their lord like this, consumed by something he could not simply take. Even Oceanus, the ancient titan of the world-encircling river, the eldest of all water gods, sent word. Control yourself, young god. Your passion disrupts the balance. The tides grow chaotic. The deep places stir with unease. But Poseidon ignored them all. What did balance matter? What did duty mean? He had found the one thing in all of creation that completed him, and she had fled into shadow. Then, after what felt like an eternity compressed into days, Proteus returned. The shapeshifter materialized in the throne room, his form settling into something almost human, almost solid. His expression was careful, controlled. "You found her?" It wasn't a question. "I found her, my lord. She dwells at the edge of the world, beneath the feet of Atlas the Titan, where the ocean meets the pillars of heaven. She is well hidden." Poseidon stood, his eyes blazing with triumph and something darker. "Then it's time to remind the world that nowhere is beyond my reach." But what Poseidon didn't know was that at the edge of the world, beneath the infinite weight of the sky, something unexpected was watching. Something that would change everything. Before we dive into the epic confrontation that shook the pillars of heaven itself, hit that like button if you're as captivated as we are and drop a comment. Do you think obsession can ever become love? Or is Poseidon doomed to destroy what he desires most? Let's find out what happened when a god challenged the very edge of creation. The journey to the world's edge was like traveling backward through time itself. The water grew strange, neither fully liquid nor fully solid, heavy with the weight of eternity. The light bent at impossible angles. Here, at the boundary between ocean and void, reality itself grew thin. And there stood Atlas. The Titan was beyond comprehension, a figure carved from living mountain, muscles like continental shelves, skin weathered by eons of punishment. Upon his massive shoulders rested the entire vault of heaven, the celestial sphere itself pressing down with the weight of infinity. Stars wheeled above him. The moon cast its silver light across his bent back. Every breath he took was measured, controlled, for even the slightest shift could send the cosmos spinning into chaos. His eyes, ancient and sad and impossibly wise, watched Poseidon approach. Young god. His voice was like tectonic plates grinding together, slow and inexorable. "You trespass in a place where even Zeus treads carefully. What brings the Lord of the Seas to the edge of all things?" Poseidon's arrival had been marked by storms, waves that crashed against the pillars of the world, winds that howled with divine fury. But here, in Atlas's presence, even his power seemed diminished. This was a Titan, one of the old gods who had nearly destroyed Olympus itself. Only Zeus's mercy, or cruelty, had spared him from Tartarus's depths. "I seek what is mine," Poseidon said, his voice tight with barely controlled emotion. "A Nereid. She hides in your shadow." Atlas's expression didn't change, but something shifted in those ancient eyes. Perhaps pity, perhaps understanding. "Nothing is yours by right of desire alone, Poseidon. Even gods must learn this. She sought sanctuary. I granted it. Would you have me break the ancient laws of hospitality? Would you have me forsake what my heart demands?" The ocean around them churned. I am not here to make war with you, Atlas. I respect your burden, your strength, but give her to me, and I will trouble you no more. No. The word hung in the water like a judgment. For a long moment, the two immortals faced each other, the Lord of the seas and the bearer of the sky. The tension was a physical thing, pressing against the fabric of reality. Then Poseidon did something unexpected. He lowered his trident. His shoulders sagged, and for the first time since this obsession began, he looked defeated. Then I am lost, he whispered, and the words carried more pain than any scream. For I cannot take her by force, not from you, not from here, and yet I cannot leave. I am trapped between command and desire, between power and powerlessness. He sank deeper into the water, his form growing smaller, more human. The mighty god reduced to something almost mortal by the simple, devastating experience of wanting something he could not have. And someone was watching. Hidden in a grotto beneath Atlas's feet, concealed by shadows and the distortion of that strange water, Amphitrite had witnessed everything. She had heard his words to Atlas, had seen his rage transform into something else, something raw and genuine. The arrogant god who had demanded her as if she were a prize had been stripped away, leaving only vulnerability, loneliness, a heart that had forgotten how to ask instead of command. Something in her chest tightened, but before she could act, before she could even process what she was feeling, movement caught her eye. Sleek and gray, impossibly graceful even in this distorted realm, a dolphin, one of the creatures she had sung to, danced with, befriended in her wanderings through the ocean. It had followed her here, tracking her across impossible distances, drawn by loyalty or love or simply the mystery of connection. The dolphin saw her, saw Poseidon, and in that simple creature's mind perhaps the solution was obvious. These two beings belonged together. Anyone with eyes could see it. The god radiating loneliness, the nymph radiating conflict, both suffering from the same wound. The dolphin swam toward Poseidon, and with a joyful leap and a chittering call that echoed through the water, it revealed exactly where Amphitrite was hidden. In that moment, three hearts stopped beating, the gods with hope, the nymphs with shock, and Atlas's with something that might have been the Titan equivalent of a sigh. Well, the bearer of heaven rumbled, I suppose even I cannot stand against the wisdom of dolphins. Amphitrite emerged from her hiding place slowly, like dawn breaking over dark water. Her sisters' voices echoed in her memory, warnings about gods and their demands, about power that crushed freedom beneath its weight. She had run for good reason. She had hidden for better ones. But the god who stood before her now was not the one who had commanded her to be his queen. This Poseidon's eyes held no arrogance, no assumption of ownership, only a question, a hope so fragile it could shatter with a single word. I was wrong, he said, and the admission seemed to cost him everything. I saw you and wanted to possess you, like a pearl from my collection, like another treasure to hoard in darkness. But you are not a thing to be possessed. You are the ocean itself, wild, free, unknowable, and I— He paused, his voice breaking like waves against stone. I am so tired of being alone. The water between them seemed to hold its breath. Amphitrite moved closer, studying his face, really seeing him for the first time. Beneath the power, beneath the rage and the divine authority, she saw what she had glimpsed only moments before through Atlas's shelter. Loneliness, a soul as deep and restless as the trenches he ruled, a heart that had forgotten how to ask for what it needed most. "If I came with you," she said softly, "would you let me dance in the sunlit shallows? Would you let my sisters visit? Would you allow me to sing to the dolphins and swim with the currents, not as your possession, but as your partner? I would build you gardens that reach to the surface," Poseidon said, his voice trembling with desperate sincerity. "I would fill our halls with light that remembers the sun. I would give you not just my palace, but my heart, if you would teach me how to offer it properly." She smiled then, and the ocean sang. What happened next was witnessed by Atlas, by Proteus lurking in the distant currents, by the ancient spirits of the deep, and none who saw it ever forgot. Amphitrite reached out and took Poseidon's hand, and at that simple touch, the ocean itself transformed. Light erupted from the depths, not harsh, not blinding, but warm and golden, as if the sun had decided to live beneath the waves. The dark palace that had been Poseidon's lonely prison began to change. Coral bloomed in impossible colors. Gardens of swaying anemones and luminescent kelp spiraled upward toward the surface. Chambers opened to the sky above, allowing shafts of sunlight to pierce the water and dance across marble floors. The throne room, once austere and cold, filled with the laughter of visiting nereids, with the songs of whales, with the playful chatter of dolphins. And speaking of dolphins, Poseidon turned to the creature who had changed everything. The dolphin chittered happily, spinning in the water, completely unaware that it had just rewritten the fate of gods. "You," Poseidon said, his voice filled with wonder and gratitude, "gave me what all my power could not win. For this I grant you and all your kind eternal honor." He raised his trident, and lightning danced across its prongs. With a gesture that split the sky above, he flung a handful of stardust toward the heavens. And there, wheeling across the night sky for all eternity, appeared a new constellation, Delphinus, the dolphin, forever swimming among the stars, a reminder to gods and mortals alike. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can move heaven itself. But the greatest transformation was not in the palace or the sky. It was in Poseidon himself. The god who had ruled through fear and power learned something that would echo through the ages, that true strength lies not in taking, but in the willingness to be vulnerable. That love demands surrender, not conquest. AI, if this tale moved you, smash that like button, subscribe for more epic myths, and tell us in the comments, what's the most important lesson you learned from Poseidon and Amphitrite's story? And if you think the ocean's depths held drama, wait until we descend into the realm where even gods fear to tread, the dark kingdom of Hades, where a different kind of love story is about to unfold. One involving forbidden fruit, a desperate mother, and a choice that would divide the world between summer and winter forever. The underworld is calling. Will you answer?